The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
Hey everybody, you are listening to Ravel, and it's me, your best buddy Basil. And with me, as always, we've got the weird, the wonderful, and the very well-rounded Christopher Ryan Gates. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Well-rounded, I take that personally these days. I have been putting on some weight here lately, so I don't know if that was some kind of a jab.
I was just trying to make up for the weird parts, the weird and the wonderful.
Weird.
I'm pretty exciting. It seems like your dad jokes are coming in early.
Yeah, I have been practicing them, for a little while, so it'll be good to actually be able to use them and have an excuse now, because you get the excuse when you're dad to just make corny jokes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of science on like the sort of developing motherhood that mothers or soon-to-be mothers experience during their pregnancy. Not a whole lot of literature on the developing fatherhood. And I'm not sure when the dad joke gland starts growing deep in your chest, but I do know it's there.
Well, one thing is that they say that sometimes the fathers gain sympathy weight, they say. My wife has not gained a whole lot of weight. She might disagree, but I mean, other than the giant belly with the infant inside of it, hasn't gained that much, but people
the
are
weight of another tiny human,
right? They're like, is this is it sympathy weight there, Chris? And I'm like, I think maybe I just enjoy pork chops or something. I'm not really sure, but yes, it is a thing. It's been happening. So anyway,
yeah, you've got to pack on some emergency calories because when the baby comes, there will be less. There will be less to go around.
That is a psychological sort of phenomenon that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, something I just made up. I don't know if that's real.
No,
but
it's true.
Feels right.
It's actually true.
Okay.
Like that. That happens a lot. They think from an evolutionary sort of explanation that may be the case. Yeah, but of course, God might have had something to do with the design of it
it's
too.
a very well-designed system. Yeah. Okay, well, speaking of which, today, Christopher, we have Ravel Gets Weird, baby.
It was bound to happen at some point, I suppose.
It was bound to happen. We normally try to keep things on the straight and narrow, but this one, we're throwing a bone to the other weirdos out there who listen to the show. We love them, and we hope they love us back for this. Today, we have a guest on the show, a very good friend of mine. His name is Gonzo Shimura, and many of you may already know about Gonzo Shimura. He is also known as Face Like the Sun. He has had the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. And if you know Gonz, you know exactly how things are going to get weird in this episode. And so, we start out the show with a nice disclaimer that, just because we explore things on the show doesn't mean we necessarily hold them as firm dogma, but we like to explore all the nooks and crannies of Scripture, society, and scandal. And I think this might be our most societally scriptural, scandalous episode yet.
Yeah.
What do you have to say for yourself, Chris?
Well, just full disclosure for everybody, listening, that most people know that you have other podcasts, and the most famous of which being your work that you've done at Canary Cry, and you guys are now into the news talk sort of chapter of that adventure there, but I started listening to when you were just doing the Canary Cry radio, and it was a format a lot more like what you and I are doing here, where you guys would talk and then have some guests on and talk about very weird things. And I always have been kind of very interested in weird things. So you don't get a lot of Christian perspective on weird things. And when I say weird things, and you'll hear this as the episode starts, but, talking about aliens and, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and things like that. And it's very easy, most of those things, to just write them off and say, oh, that's not real. But it was, for me, particularly aliens, and I talk about it here when the show gets started. But, in my teenage years, just watching some videos, and some of them were clear hoaxes, but then you see these other things, and they're very strange. And even hearing, testimonies from some people I knew who had kind of encounters, spiritual encounters or otherworldly encounters, I got to really thinking about these things, and can't say, with any certainty what any of this stuff is, but I had the desire to explore it. And then, of course, looking into, Genesis 6 and the sons of God and the fallen angels and Nephilim and all of that, and getting curious about that, I started poking around, on the internet, trying to who's talking about these sorts of things. And I found Canary Cry Radio, started listening to you and Gonz over there, and that kind of was what ended up leading to you and I meeting down the road. But you talk about a lot of very weird things, and things that, as I will talk about also, not generally accepted kind of in the academic community. In the academic community, we want to very much have facts, things that we can concretely point to and say this and this and this and this, and that's why. So when we start kind of reaching and kind of grabbing out at these things that are kind of unexplained and a little bit weird, it gets a little challenging. And then me kind of coming from a background, here just recently being in academics, there's something of a little bit of caution, that I take with kind of moving too much into those areas, but it is kind of a part of who I am as a person. I like to kind of look into the strange and the weird, and that's how I know about you guys' work. So it was inevitable that at some point we were going to have Gonz on the show, and I was really excited, and we had a really great conversation. But for some of you who might not have had, a lot of time looking into some of this stuff, it might get kind of strange.
Yes, there will be, like the disclaimer always says, some things that you'll disagree with, some just sort of triggering moments. We talk about, like Chris mentioned, some cryptozoology, some scriptural cryptozoology, things like that. We talk about some prophecy. We talk about a little bit about world events, and we also talk about some of the shows that Gonz and I do now, Canary Cry NewsTalk. I will say ahead of time, if there are Canarians listening, you will most certainly be frustrated with me at some point for sort of, you'll know exactly when. But for the rest of you who are not weirdos, I tried my best to put everything into context to try to help you understand exactly where we are coming from and sort of our heart behind things. Anywho, hope you enjoy. Again, this is a disclaimer. Things get weird in this one. So if that's something that's going to upset you or make you never listen to the podcast again, well, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it now.
It's part of the nature of what we're doing, though, too. I mean, we are trying to do the very best that we can to have open minds and hear all different kinds of perspectives without making too many judgments and giving a platform, for things to be discussed. So, we have waded into some waters theologically that might be a little bit murky, and Now we're kind of wading into some waters that might be a little bit murky kind of in as they relate to current events and the way that we interpret that. But yeah, I would just kind of echo, what Basil says. If this does seem a little bit weird, don't worry. We're not hanging out here for too long. But if you are interested in it and you have not been exposed to this before, there's plenty more out there for you guys over with what Basil and Gonz are doing at Canary Cry, so you can go look deeper into it if you haven't yet. And if it's just you think it's a little bit weird and out there, won't be too many episodes on this podcast in the future that are going to go quite where this one did.
Yes.
So yeah.
So anywho, I think you're going to enjoy. I'm being sort of overly cautious in my desire to appeal to more and more individuals and not sort of simply the niche in which I am sort of already known. But I hope you enjoy. And yes, if anything inspires you or catches your interest, there is lots of material for you to find and explore. And or just ignore, whatever the case may be for you.
The rabbit hole is deep.
The rabbit hole is deep. Okay, is there anything else we should mention here? Oh, and I do want to thank Gonz because he did come on at a very last minute thing. So we did not necessarily give him time to sort of prepare or ponder. We needed him very quickly, and we thank him for responding with the swiftness of the quickest horses of the Scythian Empire. And their famous horsemen there.
I know I hate being called at the last minute. So yes, much thanks, Gonz. I mean, I thought it went really well. I thought he did a fantastic job. Seemed like he prepared, but
Well, he's a very prepared guy. It's all up in there. It's all up in that noggin. He's been doing it a long time.
Yeah, but thank you on short notice, Gonz. But I enjoyed it. I think everyone's going to enjoy it. Just, get your tinfoil hats on, I guess, folks, and here we go.
Okay, it's the crossover everyone's been waiting for. You know him, you love him, or maybe you don't, but you will. We have Gonz Shimura, even more well known as Face Like the Sun on YouTube and all over the internet, or I guess R.I.P. Face Like the Sun, but it lives forever in our hearts.
Ouch.
My friend and co-host, Gonz Shimura. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Basil? What's up, Christopher? It's great to be here.
Hey.
Great to have you here. Now, by the time we make it this far in the episode, the audience, the listeners, will have a pretty good idea of you and I and our long-standing podcast relationship. But believe it or not, everybody, Gonz had a life before Basil, which is... we don't like to talk about it, but
PB, pre-Basil days.
Yeah. But I think this is a great opportunity to introduce the world, or perhaps a segment of the world who is not familiar with you.
Sure.
This is what it's all about. So tell us. Let's start from the beginning, Gonzo.
Wow, the beginning.
Yes. How would, if somebody out there does know who you are, how would they probably have heard of you?
Probably through a documentary that I published in 2011, which was called Age of Deceit, Fallen Angels, and the New World Order. Just published it on YouTube. And for whatever reason, the Lord used that to get the message out there about a very niche line of thought when it comes to the Bible, but also just explaining world events in a way that it was making sense to me, information that I hadn't come across when I was growing up that helped make sense of the world a lot better, especially with everything happening at the time. So
yeah,
I think Age of Deceit is probably how most people have heard of me. And it's crazy to think because I feel like I had nothing to do with it. Like I made the film, I put it out, I put it on YouTube. Okay. In 2011, it doesn't mean at the time it was world. It's just a different kind of media world. So, YouTube was still accessible in that way. Like anybody can just pop on the platform, create an account, and publish a documentary, 2.5 hours.
Now I have to jump in here and make a confession that I talked about when I was on Joyspiracy there with Basil the first time that we met, and he had this kind of routine he did all the time with everybody that everybody knew about him because they first had watched your Age of Deceit. And I confessed to him on the show there. I said, I actually started watching it, and it was actually how I found out about Canary Cry, which I have been a big fan of you guys' work for a long time. It's kind of strange. I'm almost starstruck right now. I feel like I'm a guest right now on Canary Cry Radio. But I didn't watch the whole thing. I told him that, and I was like, I was kind of trying to comfort Basil because he was like, everybody else gets on here and talks about Gonz and Age of Deceit, and I was like, I hadn't actually watched it, and I didn't mean that as any kind of diss to you, Gonz, because it was great work, but it was
it's 2.5 hours.
It is 2.5 hours. But I had watched the next two after that, so I probably should go back and revisit it. But it is long, though. It is long,
yeah.
And but I do sit down through feature-length films that are that long. But it was really good. And I have to say that the third one, when that came out, I was actually blown away. The production value got even better than you had on some of the first ones. And you have really great insights. And I'm gonna throw this out and get this over with and out of the way. That I had been a big fan of Face Like the Sun. You have a lot of great videos on there. And I remember, you might not remember this one, but you interacted with John Lennox when he was talking about artificial intelligence one time, and some of the insights that you had, where the way that you were kind of connecting some of the dots between what John Lennox was talking about and through some biblical prophecy stuff, I was really blown away. I was like, this is brilliant. Like, he's done a very good job here. So just want to throw that out there for everybody, just to let everybody know. Big fan of your work. If people for some reason haven't checked it out or seen that yet, I'm giving you my personal kind of push and recommendation to go see that. So it's good. It's good. You do a very good job.
They're going to have a hard time. And we'll get into later.
It has become a scarce commodity out there.
It's a very scarce commodity. And I do want to put this out there in the beginning because, it's sort of the elephant in the room is that you mentioned, in the title, Age of Deceit, you mentioned the Illuminati and the New World Order.
Well, New World Order specifically. Yeah. Sure, I didn't say Illuminati in the title.
Okay. See, as I continue to live in the shadow of Gonz's masterpiece. And mentioning the New World Order and sort of like, the funky internet conspiracy theory type stuff was an entirely different thing in 2011. For people who maybe weren't paying attention to that stuff, in 2011, it was like not as, politically dangerous to kind of talk about, conspiracy theories or, the New World Order or something like that. So it's interesting to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, how the times have changed in the 10 years of your sort of media making career, where in 2011, you can just kind of like have fun and create a documentary on what you see happening around you and compare it to the Bible and the prophecies therein and kind of play with these sorts of ideas. And you weren't necessarily going to be canceled or censored or called some sort of extremist or, something like that. So it was a totally different world back then. And I don't know. Well, any thoughts about that?
Yes. I think, looking back, 2011, I was 28. So, trying to figure out life. And I had come across a lot of the teaching materials of Chuck Missler. I really like David Guzik's Bible teachings. And L.A. Marzulli was one of the first people I found through researching stuff about the topics of UFOs and aliens. And, I had gotten baptized and saved, and I was reading through the Bible and stuff, but there was still kind of that
Christian at the time.
Yeah,
right?
I had just gotten baptized in 2007. So through that experience, and then I got married in 2008, and I'm a happy person. But also, with this newfound faith, I'm like, okay, well, a lot of the basic stuff makes sense about Jesus and everything else. But does the Bible, the Word of God, does it speak to more than just the cosmic, narrative about our souls and everything else? And just, conduct in terms of a civil person, human in the world. And
is it more than a worldview and a set of morals, basically?
And my sort of mission was, okay, if this other stuff completely makes sense of how to treat others and the lowly and everything else makes 100% sense. Now, does any of it, can any of it help make sense of some of this other weird stuff? Aliens, spirits, ghosts, and whatever, goblins, Bigfoot, all these fringy topics that seemingly have nothing to do with each other or nothing to do with the Bible, but it's a genre that's out there. And then when I started to look into the Bible from that perspective, and then discovering a whole narrative in the Word of God right from the beginning in Genesis 6, describing a much more lively, colorful, almost fantastic world that we live in. And by the way, which is being more and more proven each day with the advancement of science, how, wild and creative and crazy this world is, what we can do with it and what we can do within it and everything else. Because a lot of the perspective that I was shown growing up about the past and about the, Christians or just Bible stuff, old ancient things, just a bunch of people in the Bronze Age, just writing poetry, and that's it. There's nothing else to it. But in reality, it seemed like they were in front of, or at least playing with ideas of much more supernatural and much more, I would say, exciting and interesting things about reality. And none of that is new when it comes to science fiction and stuff today. So anyway, I started looking into all that through that lens. And that's when I discovered there's a whole part of the Bible that people just don't talk about. Yeah. And applying that to the worldview, or applying that to what was happening around us, and then tying it to the perpetrators, the people that run everything, seems to have made a lot of sense in my head. I was bursting at the seams. I had to do something with the information, put it in a documentary, put it on YouTube, and then that's it. So
in the genre that you're talking about, I mean, and I'll just talk about like UFOs, Bigfoot, sleep paralysis, people, shadow people,
alien abduction,
the classic sort of conspiracy theory-y characters, I mean, you think about at least before 2016, what was a conspiracy theorist? Well, it was someone who believed the JFK narrative had some problems with it, but they also believed in Bigfoot and UFOs and the cryptozoology of all kinds. And one thing that really meeting you and kind of getting into, for me, back in 2011, 2012, which we teamed up very shortly after Age of Deceit came out, and I had not even seen it. I don't know if we need to get into our whole origin story, Gonz, but, suddenly, and I was always interested in like Bigfoot and UFOs and things like that. Me and my dad would listen to Coast to Coast and things like that. But what I found fascinating, and what you sort of introduced me into the world of, was like the theology of Bigfoot and the theology of UFOs and things like that. Whereas I grew up in the church, and the most extensive explanation for those things that I was ever given for like 20 years was, oh, they're demons. They're all demons. Everything's demons. Aliens is demons. Bigfoot's is demons. Chupacabra is demons. They're all demons. And that was fine. Like, that works.
It's not wrong
I didn't really
entirely.
think about it
Yeah.
that much more. But, you mentioned Genesis 6, which actually sort of begins a theological, it's like the beginning of a theological journey into what, I think in more modern times has become separated out into Bigfoot and UFOs and chupacabras and things like that.
Sure.
But I was going to invite you to kind of talk about Genesis 6 a little bit, because it's kind of a big part of this narrative, this worldview that you're talking about and expressed in a lot of your work.
I just want to jump in on the same and hand it over to you, Gonz. But it's funny because as somebody who's gone through the academic world and pursued all of the biblical studies, at whatever the highest levels, it was one of those things. I was considering all of these things too before I went into these programs, and it kind of Aliens was probably the very first one in my young teenage years where I started like, is there anything to this? Like everybody just there must be something going on there, and started looking into it and considering how does this interact with my biblical worldview and that sort of thing. And that kind of opened me up to, I started exploring all of these strange things. And then of course, if you read your Bible, you have to do something with Genesis 6. So I start investigating that, and that's how that kind of opens up the door to all kinds of, crazy stuff on the internet as far as studies go. But it was interesting because when I was working on my PhD, I was in a biblical backgrounds class, and we had to write a paper. And I had been, I would kind of bounce it off some people in my PhD program, and I would be like, "What do you think about Genesis 6 and the Nephilim being the descendants of fallen angels and humans?" And everybody just kind of laughs and scoffs at me or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a paper about this. So
wow, oh man.
And I actually reached out to Dr. Heiser through his website, and I kind of asked him. I was like, "Listen, I'm getting ready to present a paper in one of my PhD seminars, and I really just want to make sure that I'm covering everything, and I don't make myself look like an idiot." And kind of reached out to him and gave me some pointers about how to do it. And I basically just tried to write a paper, and the only point of the paper was, it is not ridiculous to believe that the sons of God in Genesis 6 are fallen angels. That was the only point I was trying to make. I was like, if I can just convince these people that it's not ridiculous to think this, I'll feel like I've won. And it was very interesting. I remember I wrote that paper, I presented it, and everybody was kind of like, they kind of gave me, all right, you have your little point. But that was at the beginning. And by the time I got to the end of my program, I had people coming to me, and this was only 2-3 years later, several people in the PhD program, and we would just be talking about whatever we've been reading and researching and all that. And I had several different people come to me, and they were like, "Have you ever heard of Mike Heiser?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have." And they were like, "He's got some really good material." I saw this kind of change just in the small circle of people I was researching with, where people who are actually trained in the field to do the research and to understand these things, and not crazy conspiracy theorists, were understanding the Bible in this way that brought a lot of validation to some of these things that before it was just your crazy Aunt Sue who would talk about it when you guys got together. And I have a couple of my aunts, actually, every time we get together, they're talking to me about, Tom Horn's books and stuff like that. And I'm like, how are you're listening to Tom Horn? This is so weird. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that it is, for anybody who might be wondering, like, is there, like, this is crazy. Like, what are they talking about? It's not crazy. The Bible actually seems to bear testament to this. And there are people who have been looking into it. So all of these fantastical sorts of things all have some kind of grounding that if we're, able to open our minds up enough, we actually can start to understand these things from an academic and biblical perspective. So that being said, where have you gone with all of it?
But let me just say that I think listening to you talk about this and your experience just within the ranks of or the halls of academia, I think Genesis 6 might be that revival that people always talk about, like, oh, there was a revival, and it's rooted in the Word. And I think I thank you for mentioning Dr. Mike Heiser, because he has been somebody that not just his writings, but just personally has been so nice to me, and he's always answering emails, and he's a great blessing. So
great guy, yeah.
So he's, I think, single-handedly responsible for at least, dropping the topic in front of the world of academia and saying, hey, guys, this has just been here for, it's been
time
here
to deal with this.
Yeah, this is, the text is several thousands of years old. We should cover this. It's a large part. So, okay, Genesis 6. I'm going to read from I think this is the Berean Study Bible translation, and I'll stop and go into some of the Hebrew, allegedly. And please, Christopher, you're the professional. Please correct me and stop me if I say something outrageous and wrong. So,
you got it.
It says Genesis 6:1 here. Now, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. So I'm going to pause right there. Now, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, men multiplying, so, Adam, Eve, and then their children, and, they're all multiplying. They're all from Adam, and they multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, which means, okay, daughters, ladies were born. Verse 2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took as wives whomever they chose. So there you go. We have the sons of God being introduced there, right on verse 2, and the thing that really boggled my mind was, why is sons of God distinct from daughters of men? If the daughters that were mentioned in verse 1 are from men, it implies that the sons of God are not the sons of men too, because they saw the daughters of men as a separate thing, as beautiful. So it really just brings up a lot of questions about, okay, what is going on here? Who are the sons of God? Are they redeemed? Are they is it just Adam and maybe the first couple generations? So I mean, with Christopher, what do you say about the sons of God there? Because when I started to go down this path of the sons of God and who are they, it really got into some interesting things with Job and everything else. So and let me just say that part of the reason why this was really interesting, and I think this is so important, is that for the majority of young people and people that grew up in the church, they hear that the flood of the Noah's flood, the big flood, was because people were just bad people, and God was like, I'm done with you. Right. Flood the earth, right? And this worldview, or this breakdown of Genesis 6, when you get into who the sons of God are, and then we'll get to the Nephilim in verse 4, what are they doing and what's going on? It doesn't make it any easier to consume this idea that God flooded everything, but there is kind of a logic to it where it's like, oh, something with the flesh got messed up. Yeah. Something went wrong, literally physically, with the flesh, with the seed, and God had to do something to preserve the promise. Yeah,
for a full apocalyptic action by God. It's again, it's kind of one of those funny things where an outsider or a secular person, or even a Christian who is brought up in maybe a more mainstream tradition or something, you could easily think like, oh, okay, humans were just like being bad, and then so we had to destroy everything. It's a little bit of an overreaction, possibly, and you're just sort of left with that.
Assume God is psychotic, some kind of psycho God.
Right.
But the line of thinking that you're going down, you had asked, and I mean, I think it is. Sure. I think it's a very reasonable inference to make, and that point is going to get kind of explicated even further here as you move through the text. So as you keep on walking us through this text, you're going to see it more and more, that there is this contrast between these two different groups of people. And then they even draw another unique distinction about the offspring. And they're talking about the offspring as if there's something distinct from the other. And that, it takes place right here at the beginning. And of course, you have sons of God. You mentioned that it comes up in Job and some other places. I think the term comes up, I think it's some 6 or 7 times in the Old Testament. You might actually know a little better than I do on that one. But every time except for in Psalm 82, and then Psalm 82 is a whole nother discussion, it's very clearly referring to angelic beings, or you get into
Yes.
that divine council talk. Another one of the wonderful takeaways that we get from this area of study, Dr. Heiser's work and all that, the divine council totally shifts the way that we think about the cosmos and how heaven interacts with earth and all of that. But yes, sons of God every time in the text, with the exception of perhaps maybe one time, and that's just how you're gonna interpret that, is always referring to heavenly angelic beings. So to say that it is here in Genesis 2 seems very, very reasonable.
Yeah, and the thing that surprised me was that the scholarly commentary, at least the ones I came across, all stated that, as you said, in Job, the mention of B'nai Ha-Elohim, which is the phrase there for sons of God, are angelic. So it's like, so commentators have said that, preserved in these academic, these archives of books and stuff and commentary. How come it doesn't apply to earlier or other parts of the Bible in the same way? And I guess that's kind of where you start breaking things down and realizing that maybe there's something more going on than just people hitting each other with sticks or something. So,
yeah, I mean, you're talking about a mixing of angels and men. And, I don't know why. Perhaps this is in the Bible and I just sort of absorbed it, or maybe it's just, Christian tradition that gave this to me or something. But I was always under the impression that angels, had no ability to reproduce or anything like that. In fact, it's kind of funny because as I'm sitting here, a Mike Heiser post on Instagram just flashed in front of me. And this is a quote from Mike Heiser. Says, "In my experience, much of what Christians think they know about Satan, demons, and other evil powers is guided far more by Christian tradition and hearsay than the exegesis of Scripture in its own context."
Yeah.
And so, it's so much about what we consider about angels and demons and even the nature or image of the devil or things like that really stem more from, a couple thousand years of writings from human beings, just sort of putting image to translations and I guess, like Mike Heiser says here, hearsay and tradition, rather than taking it directly from the Bible. And what we see in Genesis 6 is, hey, if you just take it straight from the Bible, it looks like angels came down and took human women as wives and started bearing offspring.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, too, that kind of like even affirms this, and it's not even that hard to find or realize, is later in Genesis, you're going to have that account when, God comes down with, these two other dudes, angels, presumably,
angels,
right? And they sit down and they eat with
they
Abraham.
eat.
So it's like,
food.
okay, they have tongues. They obviously can produce saliva. They've got teeth. They're swallowing this down into some kind of organ somewhere, I'm presuming. So yeah, there's an instance where nobody scoffs at that and nobody looks at that and says, oh, angels are eating bread. I mean, come on. So yeah, there's lots there. I mean, really.
Yeah, manna being angel food. It all, the things that there are some things that I think were traditionally known that start to click in place. Like, oh, that's why. There's like another point that makes sense with this greater narrative. But yeah, I think you break down sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim. That word Elohim is also one that really piqued my interest because it's a word that means God, capital G, God, the singular God, but it also can mean other things, lowercase g, God. It can mean divine or divine being. It could be gods, lowercase g, plural, Gods, goddess, godly, judge, ruler, shrine. So there's various ways the word is used, but clearly it is of some kind of divine origin, or I think Mike Heiser calls it like a residence, term of residence. So the origin of place for us, we are born in flesh first. So, there's a lot of New Testament passages that talk about that. But for these beings, they were first made in the spirit realm and they somehow came here or are here. And yes, they breached some kind of barrier or just a separation of kinds. You know, the Bible talks about each after their own kind at the beginning in Genesis. And maybe the sons of God are different kind than the daughters of men, although probably humanoid, I guess, since, you know, there's
presumably they could be rock monsters.
Stuff happens. So yeah, rock monsters, which is interesting.
Which in its most simple form, I think that's a great point. I don't know if I ever considered that, the each after their own kinds, because earlier in Genesis, you know, and each, took after their own kind, or bore after their own kind. So it stands to reason that if you had, sons of God and daughters of men, two different kinds, bringing something else forth, that is directly in opposition to like the original plan.
The original plan, yeah.
Which
the
seems
original
like a
order,
little bit more serious of an infraction,
a violation. Yes,
it seems like a violation on like an existential sense, versus, again, what we're kind of told in Sunday school, which is, humans were mean to each other and were maybe, having sex out of wedlock or something, sort of your straightforward human sins, which, the flood seems a little bit of overkill for that, just in sort of our modern sense of things, at least. But the idea of an existential infraction against the foundations of the existence of creation.
Yeah, no, it's good. This is God's great reset,
Yeah, a little bit more of a reason to hit the whoopsie daisies button.
Well, and it's too, I mean, it's you have to be careful when you're trying to, establish motive for characters in the Bible and things like that. And it says here that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. So presumably that is their motivation. They just look down and say, wow, those are some very finely crafted human beings down there. And they're given over, to their lust. But there also is the argument that some people have tried to make where, the curse that's given to the serpent in the garden, is that the descendant of mankind, woman, the seed of woman. Interestingly, the seed of woman. Women don't have seed, so that's very interesting that it would be a virgin birth, basically being prophesied there. But that is going to be what crushes the head of the serpent. So there could be some kind of motivation there too. If we go down and contaminate the entire gene pool, then this prophesied Messiah never will come. And it was actually an attempt to thwart God's plan to deliver people through a son born of men. But anyhow.
Yeah, again, this speaks to so many different layers of scripture, and especially with Jesus, the virgin birth, that all locks into place as well when you look at this stuff, and just maybe why God had to do what he did to bring forth a Messiah and to do it when he did and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think we're ever going to get through the scripture because we just keep talking. Yeah,
keep going.
Keep going. It's just so awesome. I love it, because it's just so much, so rich.
We may be putting the cart before the horse. So why don't you read some more scripture, guys?
Okay, so verse 2, the violation takes place. Verse 3, so the Lord said, and by the way, God wasn't stoked about this. My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days shall be 120 years. And then verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, and afterwards as well, when the sons of God had relations with the daughters of men, and they bore them children who became the mighty men of old, men of renown. Oh, I think we're going to be here for like 3 hours if we really want to break all that down. But
I mean, there's definitely a lot there, but I think the point being is that, I mean, it says there plainly in Scripture that that these sort of, like you said, divine-like, or at least spiritually rooted beings are mixing and operating on the earth. There's something weird. They're not normal. Nephilim, of course, have been sort of connected to giants and things like that.
It's translated giants in the King James Bible. So most people who read the Bible there will see the word giants instead of Nephilim. But yes.
But you also have reference to these mighty men. And, these mighty men are often described in sort of cryptozoological ways. I mean, that might be a bit of a stretch in language, for lack of a better term. But wasn't it the one of the mighty men who had like a lion's head or something like that?
There are tribes. Yeah, there are various tribes that are described with 6 hands on, or 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. I think there's like one that, if you break down the Hebrew, it means a long neck, and another one described as lions. So yes, there are. And, people have argued that it's just colorful ways to describe a different people groups, or
it could be a
violent
poetic
group or whatever.
Poetic allegory of Genesis.
Right.
But, that's
but
one
there's
of the...
also there lots of times the poetry and the allegory ties back even into something that was true. And lots of times the enemies of God are described in zoomorphic types of ways, and you see that in the Psalms a lot, and in Psalm 22, something that I've spent a lot of time studying, that comes up where all of the enemies are being described as animals. And it could just be poetic, but a lot of times those sorts of things are grounded in some kind of truth that you find back in history somewhere. But even the term Nephilim, it's from the Hebrew verb nephal, which is to fall. It's fallen. They are the fallen ones, which is that's what it actually means in the Hebrew, which is interesting. It's like, so why are these just normal dudes? Why are they considered fallen? Like, what is, and this is what we were talking about just a moment previous, where it's, why are we making some distinction about these particular groups of people? The plot continues to thicken here as you read through it, but definitely something very strange going on with these guys. And then what is it about them? Just because a righteous guy, some people will say it's the descendants of Seth, and then the descendants of Cain, and those are the two groups that are intermarrying. And then it's like, but why, if the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth intermarried, why would these be mighty men? Why would these be men of renown? What happened with these guys that they were extraordinary, that we would need to, put some aside in here about them? Yeah.
Let me just finish up a couple more verses, and then we can go off into a different direction if you want, Basil. But verse 5 here says, "Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great upon the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was altogether evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, every man and beast and crawling creature and bird of the air. I am grieved that I have made them." And then he finds favor in Noah. Noah, however, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. To this account of Noah, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generations. And that's the big line that made it all click for me, because I was going, what does that mean, blameless in his generations, if we're talking about some kind of intermingling of generations, of seed, of our DNA, of our very being? Something about it was blameless, meaning... I think I got to get into the concordance here to get to all the details. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head here.
But you're right. I mean, it references the fact that, in this time of intermingling of, spiritual beings and humans, and the sort of abominable offspring that brings forth, the what is the word? I don't know. The connotation there is that Noah's bloodline did not have any of this sort of corruption.
Contamination. Yeah. So the word is tamim, the word for blameless, and it means complete, sound, blameless, intact, integrity, perfect, unblemished, without blemish, without defect, which again speaks to, so there's something defective about the people around him at the time, which would cause a flood. I would understand that would make sense. So, all these little points in Genesis 6 that click, and then it wasn't just, going through this, it was looking through Matthew 24. Jesus talks about, as it were in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. And it's like, oh, okay, well, what was going on in the days of Noah? And then you start looking at this Nephilim stuff and you're going, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It speaks to kind of the things happening in our world today with all the laboratories and the everything else. So
like the transhumanism stuff, are you getting?
Transhumanism, that
genetic modification or chimeras. You see news stories popping up here and there, like, oh, they mixed a human with a monkey, or they found a jellyfish that they mixed, well, again, with a monkey. We're messing with a lot of monkeys.
These are the ones
apparently.
we hear about.
Yeah, this is the one we hear.
Yes.
Ones we hear about. That's right. Yeah, we don't
God
hear
only
about the
knows
ones.
what else is happening.
Yeah, no, the things that have happened are probably pretty abhorrent by now, especially with the technology available. But that makes, just to me, I have more conviction that we're pretty much in the days of Noah again. People don't necessarily take that literally per se, but the other thing was that this speaks to other mythologies, Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Greek mythology it's like, oh, the stuff they did, that's Greek mythology. You get a whole lowdown on the kind of activity, or at least what's preserved or remembered about some of the things that they did. But again, it's just it's
You're
clear
talking
that
about spiritual beings getting involved romantically with humans. Yeah, the Greek pantheon is just littered with,
what do they
this
call
exact
them
type of
in
thing.
Greek mythology? The offspring of a god and a
there's Titans. Yeah, there's Titans.
Are they Titans?
Yeah, I think the Titans are the most popular name anyway for them.
Yeah, but when I started to think about that, when Genesis 6, I started understanding it from a fallen angel angle, and then I started thinking about Greek mythology. I was like, this might not have all been how am I trying to say it? This might not have all been, a fantasy. That there might have actually been something going on here. These people might actually be hearkening back to something where the gods, as it were, came down and were getting involved in human affairs and those sorts of things. And because, it is strange. Everybody looks back at primitive man, and of course, we consider them to be primitive, but when you think about some of the architecture and some of the mathematics and the advanced knowledge they had of science and things like that, they may not have been that primitive, but then they say, oh, they made up these stories to explain the things that they couldn't explain. And it's like, maybe they were actually very in tune with the spiritual world, and they were actually communing with these sorts of things. And now we are just in a further age of deception, if you will, where we are deceiving ourselves with all of our science and all of our knowledge and all of those things like that. And we're explaining this stuff away so we don't have to be kind of influenced by other spirits in such a manifest way as may have happened in the past. That's kind of my take on it. That's why you maybe had it going on a long time ago and you don't see it now. But I was wondering, do you think that if it says as it was in the days of Noah, and we are seeing some gene splicing and manipulation, but do you foresee a day or time when there may be another physical manifestation of some kind of other worldly being that may make itself known or themselves known here on Earth? Because this is talk that comes up from time to time.
Yeah,
no one can know for certain, but I'm just wondering.
No one can
where
know
you're
for
at.
certain. Yeah, no, this is the kind of off the deep end stuff that gets me into trouble thinking about it too much. But with the stuff emerging now, the metaverse, NFTs, the virtual reality, augmented reality, and the hive mind, and how people interact and operate online, and how they do it in these swaths and these big, large groups and stuff.
AI is running rampant.
AI is running rampant
on the internet.
It seems like the spiritual entities presenting themselves in a interactive way, the tools to do such things has expanded with this whole internet and the whole metaverse. Because before it was a lot of, I'm sure, imagination, people using their imagination or some kind of psychoactive, mind-altering substance to create experiences and stuff like that. And if you think about what VR and all that stuff is, it's a mind-altering, it's an experiential thing. It's people are going to have, quote unquote, I air quote it. This is just audio, right? I'm used to doing video now, so I'm doing air quotes, but no one can see them. quote unquote, what was I saying? I totally forgot what I was talking about now.
VR and
VR, but I was
reality.
You're talking
drugs.
about, the digital realm being another realm, and even with
Right,
the
another
creators
realm.
and sort of the fathers of Silicon Valley and this new metaverse digital future that they are talking about, you hear them talking this way. They talk about creating God in the AI. They talk about introducing beings through artificial intelligence and quantum computing. They talk about the digital realm as a separate realm, as like a maybe not fully spiritual, but a different realm, an analog of sort of a spiritual realm. And I think maybe, unless you have a burning desire to, if you have a good answer at this exact moment, Gonz, I think I know where I'd like to introduce our next topic.
Can I just ask what's going on with Cern right now? Because I haven't heard about it in a while.
No, you cannot, Chris.
What's going on with Cern? Do you guys know?
Because
I heard all about it several years ago, and now just nothing. It's just I don't hear anything about it anymore.
I think they were down for a little bit, and I think they just turned back on or something. But they go on like years long maintenance periods. So they plus all the data collected, they still haven't sorted through all that from the first however times they smashed particles or whatever. So there's some downtime to process the data and look for things. And we periodically hear about like, oh, another thing that might break all of known physics. Give us more money. So that's kind of what they do.
That's sufficient. We can move on. I just needed to know what was going on with Cern.
So, because I feel we are very close to the edge, we are
I do have an academic reputation of some sort to protect here. So let's not go too far.
Because not all of our listeners are going to be as versed in sort of the weird layers of things that we are just sort of casually trying to flip through right now.
There's a lot of layers,
here's the point is, running. So the topics that Gonz first started exploring in Age of Deceit that include, that are very scripturally rooted. And of course, the Bible makes lots of references to a future time that will replicate some characteristics, such as in the days of Noah. Now, Gonz, you and I, now our main project is a podcast called Canary Cry NewsTalk, which we focus primarily on, corporate news, mainstream reporting on world events. And we spend 3 or 4 hours 3 times a week simply combing through and digging through current events and what is happening in the world today, mainly with a focus on analyzing, the communication strategies, the biases and manipulations of corporate legacy news media, which I think it's pretty acceptable now to work on a basis that, the major news networks are not necessarily too concerned with presenting the facts in a raw and honest manner every single time. They have a profit motive. They have fiduciary responsibility to their investors. They're, it's not a pure form as perhaps it never was, and so you can't really blame them for that. But we also deconstruct what's happening in current events and the news and the social engineering that happens through narrative crafting in the medium. Yeah, and we do this in sort of a framework, keeping in mind the things mentioned in the Bible, the theology surrounding, maybe some of the stranger aspects of Scripture that don't get preached every Sunday morning, and the prophecies for such a time as they are described in the Bible. And I think it's good to, first of all, be transparent about all the weird stuff that we sort of frame a lot of what's going on in modern times. Again, talking about Genesis 6 among a myriad of other scriptures that don't get too much attention, because you really see a lot of this stuff happening now. And it's not even that hidden. And you don't have to do too much interpretation or stretching of scripture to find certain things being mirrored in current events today. And so, when we talk about our career, Gonz, our history of the things that we have explored, it's been a little bit maddening. And that's why we had to start doing 3 days a week, 4 hours a day, simply to sort of dig through and analyze and give the attention it deserves to current events. And I think that it's very special, but it does. I think what I'm trying to say is it makes sense. So many things start to make more sense, and you're able to see the world from a much higher view that includes the biblical times and the prophecies given back then, and how they can, maybe do, but certainly can relate to things happening today. What does that make you think about, Gonz?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just to get into sort of the more modern parts of what we're doing as we're on the second half of the show here.
Yeah. Part of it, I think what you're trying to get at too, describing what we do and why, is there's a cost. You get a little jaded about what's happening because we just go through so much information, and you got to have a solid foundation of what's true ultimately to be able to wade through the stuff, because it is weighing. You see a lot of news stories. We don't always report on some of the bad deaths and stuff like that. But it's weighing on everybody for sure.
It is easy to get overwhelmed with current events, and you may not even be going through 200 articles a week like we do, and you can get totally overwhelmed.
Oh.
I feel it. I don't go through 200 articles, and it's almost too much anymore. You almost just have to. One of the things I appreciate about you guys is you make it light, some of this heavy stuff, and you kind of are like, okay, here's the crazy stuff that's going on, but kind of laugh your way through it and provide a little bit of hope too from a biblical perspective. So just
thank you.
Throwing it out there, but
we like to
continue.
We like to laugh to keep from crying. So
that is the motto.
So to go back to sort of what Chris was asking about, he was asking about Cern. And for example, we've been following very closely what Cern is doing. And for those who don't know, Cern is the institution that operates the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. And, there's been a lot of prognostication about Cern and the ramifications, not just scientifically, of using really massive, incomprehensible amounts of power to smash particles together. And in the words of the scientists at CERN, they're talking about opening portals to other dimensions. They're talking about,
they're doing weird rituals outside of the thing too.
They do.
Yeah, there's rituals. Yes,
they do rituals. They make references to the spirit world. Some CERN representatives have gone so far as to postulate about reaching other beings through tears in dimensions that they create at CERN. And this can sound all very, again, conspiracy-y or hocus pocus or bizarre, or maybe sort of LARPing, internet LARPing. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter if we or someone listening who considers themselves, a normal person, believes in it or not, you take the words from the mouths of the scientists at Cern, and they believe it, or at least they claim to believe, or they are very liberal in their use of metaphor, if that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that is the other
talking
option.
about spiritual realities being accessed through science, and CERN is just one example of that.
Yeah, and the spiritual realities, but also, with the topic of CERN, what a lot of people, and I think CERN plays into the idea that there is a faction of people that are following them and talking about their overt occult symbology and all the things, because it seems like they started to feed the hype,
That's
a little
possible,
too much. But in any case, in the Bible there are talks about the abyss, and it's mentioned in Luke 8. It's mentioned in Revelation 20. It's described in a way that I don't know if it's a location, but it's described like a location, an isolated location. And so, when you hear scientists talk about, and the one I remember very early on when I first started really tracking CERN, there was an article with a scientist who said that if all goes to how it's supposed to with the mathematics and everything, we should be able to open a hole in space-time and peer into this other dimension. And he's like, we may not be able to bring things through or whatever, but we should be able to do it. And it was like, what, really? And I had to keep checking.
Didn't they make some comment too about what might actually, not us going through, but what might come through from the other side or something like that?
They weren't worried about going into the portal. They were worried about what might come out of the portal.
Right.
We could suck the whole world into a black hole, but we should do it in the name of science.
Yeah, I think that was that Stephen Hawking? That might have been Stephen Hawking who said that. There were some scientists out there warning about CERN and the implications. But you're right. All these topics in science and really just all institutions, world institutions, everything is having first off a national level impact, then a global impact, whatever size or shape you think the Earth is. The whole world is now one big thing, and everything's happening all at once on the Earth. The whole globalization, the New World Order. It's really here. The communication system, everything else, it's all being built, and in that process, everything becomes a cosmic conversation. That's why in the realm of AI and robotics, that you have the religion of AI, the church of AI, and you have robots helping
Which
out
is a literal
temples.
thing, by the way.
A literal thing.
I hear
I'm
you
not making
mentioning. I hear you mentioning things, and I hate to like supervise too much, but just because I know we have some listeners who are not necessarily in our realm of our other show. You talk about the New World Order.
Do I sound crazy was that crazy talk to normal people? That is completely normal to me. This is like, this is all factual stuff that I've vetted.
I can just tell you that when I, refer this to some of my colleagues, they will probably find it quite bizarre.
Yes.
But I'm tracking with everything.
But
you guys are cool too. I'm just over here,
Hold on. Let me help.
Talking.
Let me help. Because when you talk about the New World Order, this obviously will trigger ideas of crazy conspiracy theorists and
the wrestlers.
Here in 2021, it may even make allusions in people's, sort of what they've been taught to make connections between. They will probably, trigger ideas of, a guy sitting in his basement, planning to take down, I don't know, a pizza factory or something like that. But the point being is, when you say New World Order, you are not speaking from a conspiracy theory place.
No.
You are referring to the New World Order that George H. Bush talked about,
Yeah.
that Klaus Schwab, the current leader of the World Economic Forum, talks about the New World Order. You hear members of European Union Parliament talking about a new world order. You hear heads of world banks talking about a new world order. So you're not talking about some blog post from the 90s. You're talking about current alive leaders around the world who are using the words the new world order. So I just want to, for those who are not necessarily into all the weird stuff, I just want to make the point that, Gonz, your and I's mission is not to theorize about conspiracies. What we do is read the mainstream news word for word and put it all together. And it's interesting. The scary part about it is when you take their words, and if we are to believe them as leaders of this world that we live in, they are the ones telling us they want a new world order and that sort of thing. So, that's where we come from, is not to make up stories or repeat blog posts that we've read or anything like that.
Right.
We
Yeah,
simply
important point.
take the mainstream corporate news, read it, and analyze it and deconstruct it.
Well, this is
Yeah.
one of the things along the line of, the New World Order or Illuminati or whatever name anybody might want to give to this, malevolent force that's operating behind the scenes and pulling strings and all of those things. Is it's like it may sound kind of crazy to people or hokey, but I always refer people, just if you have any kind of knowledge of eschatology, if you read through Revelation, and if you are someone who is has your premillennial in your understanding of the eschaton, then you believe that there are going to be these series of events that are going to happen to usher in the return of Christ. And those things take place, as the Bible tells us, where the world comes under the rulership of one person. So all governance is unified. So the whole world somehow comes into agreement and submits itself to the authority of this one person. You have a one world religious system, a one world economy, and all of these things. And if you believe that, if you believe the Bible, then you have to start asking yourself the question, how would that ever take place? You look around at the world and it's like, how would all of the nations of the world ever come together, under one person? Or how could the whole world be on one type of currency? Or whatever. You start asking these questions about how this is going to happen. And then all you have to do is stop and start looking around, and you start to see, wow, this stuff is happening all around us. And if you believe the Bible to be true, which most of us do, then you have to understand that all of these things are going to start coming, these prophecies are going to start coming into fulfillment slowly but surely. It's probably not going to happen overnight. It's probably going to be this sort of slow thing that happens. And that is, again, when you guys are talking about these sorts of things that some people might be like, oh, the New World Order, you guys are crazy, Illuminati, this is nuts. It's like, do you believe that the devil actually has a plan to bring the whole world under his sway? Because that's what the Bible tells us. So if you do, how do you think he would go about doing that? And I think that the work that you guys are doing is kind of shining a light on, this is how this is taking place right in front of our eyes. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there. If you believe the Bible's true, then the things you guys are talking about are not crazy.
Yeah. And how perfect would it be for, in the stratagems of the adversary, to make simply looking at the world around you and transform that into something called crazy conspiracy theory. To simply look around and note the world events and the words coming out of the mouths of our leadership, just to look at reality around you and label that, or have, influence others to label that as crazy conspiracy theory, off your rocker type of thinking, that would be a very successful strategy of a supernatural, malevolent force who has some sort of, plan. And so,
yeah, what is it? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist. Somebody said that one time. So
I believe that was C.S. Lewis. I could be wrong. But anyways, Gonz, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sort of steamroll you there.
It's okay.
But it is my hope. First of all, shout out to all the Canarians out there. Yes, I'm sure they're actually very frustrated with me trying to put this into perspective. But for those who come to Ravel, not because of my previous work or anything like that, I just want to make clear that it's very easy to switch off when certain terms come up, but just know that hopefully you can trust us in knowing that we're not here to spread any nonsense for nonsense sake, but simply paying attention. There are some things that you cannot avoid. So I'm sorry I had to do that to you, Gonz. I'm going to get some bad comments about that, but
I want to hand it over to Gonz here in the last little bit of time that we have, and kind of related to where this has all been going. But we got some kind of a message through either social media or an email or something that I read, and somebody was actually asking specifically about you and some of the censorship issues that you've been facing, and they asked about having you comment about that, and we had mentioned it way back at the beginning here when we got started about how it might be hard to find some of your work these days. So can you talk a little bit about that? Why is it hard to find your work? What is going on with all of that for you specifically, and then kind of in a broader sense, the bigger picture there?
Yeah, so I guess first off, the Face Like This on YouTube channel that was started on, I think it was June 2011, was
How many
shut down.
subscribers did you have on that?
When it was shut down, I think there was 264,000. It was sitting in the 260,000s for, I think, close to a year. It really slowed down at the end. It was kind of strange. I can tell they were choking me out. It was like, okay, you guys are done with me. All kinds of drama over the years.
Talking about YouTube, Susan.
YouTube, sorry, yes, YouTube. Me and YouTube, yes, best buds. And finally, they brought down the hammer, and over the summer of 2021 here. So yes, I think there was about 1,100, close to 1,100 videos on the channel, and a lot of those towards the end was Canary Cry NewsTalk. So I was kind of shifting focus over to Canary Cry NewsTalk as stuff started to die, regardless. But in terms of just the censorship, it doesn't surprise me at all, and to be honest, it's one of those things where I'm one of many, I don't know how many, definitely dozens or more, maybe even into the hundreds if we tally all of them, of content creators that have been deplatformed from something like YouTube. So, I'm not, it's one of those things where I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not, it's just, it's going to happen. We're speaking on things that raise awareness about the nature of reality and the spiritual reality. It's not going to be popular. It's not going to be jiving with what the world wants to preach, especially given, we've been talking about the New World Order, and, Basil, you've been very apologetic about it, but I think it's, I brought this up, so I want to just drop it in. I know we're shifting back a little bit, but one of the points I made in Age of Deceit, the film, was that the phrase New World Order, yes, world leaders have used it. Yes, it's been in print as well, like in newspapers publishing the phrase New World Order multiple times. But the phrase was, at least in the modern era, was not first used, but used by somebody named Alice Bailey back in the 1930s and 40s. I think she passed away in 1949. She was born in 1880, so early 20th century. And she formed a magazine called Lucifer Magazine, which was later changed to Lucius Trust. Mm-hmm. And she wrote a book called The Externalization of the Hierarchy, and multiple other writings where she claims that all of this writing, all these ideas were coming from a spiritual entity, a higher entity named Dejua Kul. So she was channeling this information, or at least this is the claim by Alice Bailey. And again, in those writings, there's a whole how to build a new world order. There's a whole layout of how to do it. And so when you take that and think, okay, well, that's maybe in the 30s, it gets popular with elite circles, and now it's trickled out to this era where we have crazy big tech companies with censorship powers that they don't even understand they have, and centralized governments and everything else, and now we'll probably start seeing some pretty interesting changes in the landscape of the information warfare and everything out. And Basil and I, we're going to be here to ride it out as long as the Lord is willing, because it's not an easy ride, but
So what do you attribute your kind of cancellation to? If there's lots of people out there talking about Nephilim and stuff, and you obviously are getting into New World Order stuff. But if I'm wanting to sympathize with you, that's easy to do. But if I'm wanting to be a little more skeptical and think, well, maybe you must be up to something nefarious. You must be breaking rules. You must be like, they can't just decide to pull you without any good reason. So like, what is going on? What are you getting into?
Gonz,
Okay,
I think your Twitter suspension is a great example. If I could lay it out and you could respond to it.
Sure.
So Gonz was recently suspended from Twitter indefinitely, and it was because of a post he made posting a video of a Swedish person receiving a microchip in their hand. Now, some background. The Swedes love microchips in their hands. It's a popular thing to do over there. That's not particularly unusual. That's very well known.
That's old news.
Yeah, it's old news. The Swedes, first sort of pioneered by certain big corporations over there. There's an
American company too that does it.
Give a microchip.
At least the last we looked. Yeah.
Give a microchip to their employees' hands. This microchip, serves as a key fob, like a key card that they can get into their office. It serves as a payment thing to buy snacks in the break room. It serves as this and that. So Swedes getting microchips in their hand is not a new thing. We've reported on that years ago. But the new thing is that Swedes are putting their vaccine passports onto their microchips, which obviously to Christians sort of.
Is there something wrong with that?
It is not a stretch.
I don't understand the problem.
It is not a stretch to simply make reference to the book of Revelation and what is described as the mark of the beast. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Gonz, as your partner and friend, and hopefully the listeners trust me, I will say you are very level-headed with this type of stuff. We are not mark of the beast. We're not some of these people who are setting dates for the return of Christ. We're not out there, trying to hunt down the mark of the beast per se. In fact, a lot of what we do is debunk mark of the beast things, just because there's so much of it out there in certain Christian circles. But you tweeted a video of a Swede getting the microchip implanted, which was a widely reported and distributed video. Many blue checkmark Twitter people posted this video. They would mention, they said, this is crazy. Look at this. The Swedes are getting microchips. This guy's got his passport on here. Now, you did it slightly differently. You posted the video and you didn't even mention the words mark of the beast, but you said something to the effect of, this, is interesting when you look at it in the context of Revelation, the book of Revelation. I think you referred specifically to Revelation 13.
I can read it to you because it does, in hindsight, it was a little inflammatory. I can see how I can offend somebody with it, but here's what I said. Yeah, so the tweet was, this is some graphic footage of a man receiving a microchip implant into his right hand to serve as COVID vaccine certificate in Sweden. Whoever says this isn't the most profound contemporary archetype of Revelation 13, 16 through 18 is in deep denial. So maybe there's that part.
I think that is very reasonable. You're saying it's a contemporary archetype of Revelation 13. I'm sorry, I forget what the actual verse
Revelation
is.
13, 16 through 18. Yeah.
And you did not say it was the mark of the beast. You did not say this was the end times. You did not. You simply referenced a Bible verse in the context of a video that plenty of people shared and didn't get suspended for. So why do you think you got suspended for it?
I don't know. I wonder how many other people who mentioned the mark of the beast in a retweet or something like that, especially people that have a lot of followers, if they got banned too. Because I really haven't been looking into it that much. It doesn't bother me. I get it. Maybe if I start saying everything is the mark of the beast, they'll let me stay on there.
You didn't say it was the mark of the beast. I think the simple fact is the fact that you referenced the Bible is the one thing that is different from your tweet versus some of the other, many other Twitter accounts that posted the video without referencing the Bible. So it seems like that somebody over at Twitter doesn't like it when the Bible
is mentioned with this topic or
some
this
crazy
category
Christian,
or something.
Points out something that everybody else is pointing out. But you give a Bible reference, and that's the only difference, and it gets you suspended.
Yeah, well, the pattern with getting us shut down for medical misinformation, which is what happened to the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel, as well as cyberbullying.
What was the last video that you posted there?
The last video that I posted, I don't remember.
It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I
think it was a News Talk episode, but I don't remember which one. I could probably dig it up.
We're constantly getting hassled for medical misinformation, which is hilarious because all we do is read the mainstream news and read scientific articles. And it's like we they're calling it misinformation, and all we're doing is reading their own news.
I just think they don't like us. I feel like they're just saying, no, it doesn't matter. We just don't like you the people. We don't like you. Go away. That's kind of what I feel like. But it's the information. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what it feels like. And, it is what it is. So I'm not too concerned. The Lord's been good throughout all of it. It's been amazing. The community is amazing. I guess you can go to facelikethesun.info to find stuff, but I need to get back to working on some of that.
I think what Chris is trying to ask you is, do you think there are specific targeting of Christian material? Or do you think that Christian material just gets swooped up in broader attempts to control narratives?
Both. I remember when people started talking about, hey, there's Christians specifically targeted. A lot of Christians, even, the sentiment was more like, everyone likes to kind of say persecution, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about being on an internet platform or something like that. Mm-hmm. But as time goes on and those avenues become how everybody receives information, to be choked out, it kind of makes sense because it kind of goes back to, again, what the truth is and what would actually solve a lot of the problems here. Is really the biblical worldview in full practice and it's partly why Jesus came and everything else and the whole theology there, because humans are incapable of achieving or doing such things. So,
well, it's interesting because, I do have my own kind of idea about it, but it's interesting because as I consider, some of the people who are getting, kind of shut down, you have any number of preachers and pastors, in Sunday morning services that are preaching the gospel and pretty mainstream sort of Christian ideas and teaching through the Bible and those sorts of things in a very mainstream sort of way. Well, as far as like evangelical mainstream ideas, and then they're perfectly fine, and they're left alone, and they get to do their thing, and that's great, and praise the Lord that they can. And then on the other side, you have sometimes some news outlets that can be very, conservative, and they can, make speculations about, where the world is headed, and they can call, particular political parties or personalities, evil in those sorts of things. But it seems that there's something extra dangerous, I guess, in the eyes of the people who moderate these things when you combine the two of those. Kind of the Christian worldview and then the news, like at the same time.
You can talk about your Bible and have your little, club, but don't start, trying to put it in context of our modern world.
Yeah.
You just leave it in your little zone.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gonz, for your time. I know you're running out of time here, so I want to let you go.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it's all good. But what else? Is there anything else you want to leave the people with?
Oh, not really. Just if you haven't checked out Canary Cry NewsTalk, please do. And yeah, appreciate you having me on. This was last minute, by the way. So if I said something, I feel like I said something that needs to be
No. You did great.
Edited or something, because
I mean,
you text me right before, and I'm like, I felt very, very unprepared for this.
You helped us out a lot. We had a last minute open up in our schedule that we needed to get something, and I appreciate it very much. And no, you did a perfect job. And it's not, it is, we are who we are, Gonz, and we can't keep that light under a bushel. But I think the biggest takeaway is that for those who are out there seeing the world go crazy around them, you are not crazy. You are not crazy.
No.
And just because so many people have been convinced to ignore certain parts of the Bible, or that it's crazy to try to make connections between ancient scriptural prophecies and current events. There's certainly a way to overdo it, and we want to come at it with a sound mind and with sound strategy, and of course with keeping Jesus as the focal point instead of making it some sort of entertainment. And, you've always been very good at that, Gonz, for over a decade that I've known you. And, of course, you're the people around the world who have interacted with your content, not just our content, Gonzo, but your content alone, has made a lot of sense for people who have been told their entire lives that they are crazy and they just need to stay in line. So I appreciate your work very much, and yes, it's a little bit of a joke, but not really, that your work pre-Basil will always overshadow me, and I appreciate that very much. And Chris, you got anything else to say to make Gonz feel confident that he should come on the show again?
Oh yeah, no. I am, as I said, have been a fan of your work. It is a shame that the stuff that you get to do on your own, the Face Like the Sun channel, has been taken down forever. Because I was really a big fan. Watched most all of those as you put them out. Some really great content, very interesting stuff. And for those of you out there, who maybe want to explore some more of this, the guys do a really good job, kind of keeping you up to date. I mean, 4 hours every other day it's a big commitment, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, so when you can get in there, check it out, do it. We appreciate very much you coming in here at the last minute and saving us for today's episode, so thank you very much. And it'll be fun to talk with you again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I would love to pick your brain more, Christopher, and ask you questions. I always have questions.
You guys need
curious mind.
You need another just a regular CCR. The people want it. So if you ever get back to that, I'd love to come on and chat it up on some of the work I do. But we'll see how it all goes.
Basil and I need to clone each other.
Yeah.
And so we have people working more podcast stuff.
We got to get that AI. We need to create that vocal deep fake of us so we can have the robots making some podcasts while we sleep. Well, thanks again, Gonz. We appreciate it very much, and the people love you. And yes, everybody out there, Canary Cry NewsTalk, if you want to hear more from Gonz and I. But of course, head to facelikethesun. What is your
.info takes you to the link tree, and then you can sort of click around and
Is
find
there
stuff.
access to Age of Deceit through there?
There's supposed to be.
Yeah, people are always asking me about that, and I don't know, but I'll just start pointing them there.
Yeah, I think there is a way. It's just kind of buried a little bit. I should make it a little clearer. Something went down. When the YouTube stuff went down, I think the website went down with it. I don't know. There's just some stuff that went down. So
everything's going down.
Everything's heavy. It's harder to pick back up when there's a lot of stuff on the ground.
Well, thank you very much, Gonz. We'll let you go. And Chris, say goodbye to the people.
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.
Okay, well, that was something.